Hey guys, this is Justin at the Survivor Review, and today we're talking about episode 4 of HBO's Watchmen. Now this show just keeps getting weirder and weirder, and I did really enjoy this episode, despite the fact that I feel like it didn't really move the plot forward too much. It added a lot more new things and connected a few dots here and there, but for the most part I felt like it was kind of just at a standstill. And that being said though, I still really enjoyed it. There's still a lot of interesting things happening, and I'm still like invested in finding out what the story is and where it's going. So I still definitely liked it. I just thought there could have been a little bit more with the story like moving forward. So this episode begins like a very cheesy commercial with this couple living on this farm, and you see like the wife has all these eggs set up that she's selling and no one comes by to buy them, and as she's walking up the steps she drops them and spills them all over, but one of them makes it and rolls into like the hand of the husband, and he's just like, hey, and she's like, oh, and you see them like doing a puzzle together and like cooking food together, and I'm just like, what's going on here? This is not gonna go well. Something bad's gonna happen, right? And not quite, just something weird, because they hear a knock at the door and they answer it, and it's this lady named Lady True, and they're both like oh my god, it's you. And I'm sitting there like, who? And basically, she's this person who has this giant tower that they're building, this like rich billionaire, or trillionaire actually, as she says, who's building this big clock and everything. So they're letting her into the house and everything and talking to her like, oh man, this is such a big deal, you know? And then basically she says, hey, I want your land. And they're like, wait, what? And she's like, well, you know, you don't have a family or anything. I've been to the hospitals and stuff. I know that you guys can have children, so I want this land. Also, in return, I will give you a baby that is fully yours. And with everything, it's genetically yours. And they're just like, what? At first they're like, this is ridiculous. Like, no, get out of my house. Like, this is crazy. And then she brings the baby in, and that just totally convinces them to sign the house over to her. And this whole scene was just bizarre and just kind of weird, how basically she was using this baby to get their property from them. Like, it was just this really weird scene. I don't know what it was about. It had just a kind of off vibe to it. But then like they hear this rumbling sound and everything, and they run outside and you see like this like meteor type of thing falling from the sky, and they're just like, what's that? And she just goes, that's mine. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what her plan is, but you do get more of her as the episode progresses. It kind of explains a little bit more of what she's doing. But that scene did not go in the direction I was expecting it to, and I'm really intrigued by this character. She's a really interesting, different type of character. I like her. She's fascinating. So after that, we see Angela going back to her bakery and cutting up the wheelchair, basically trying to destroy the evidence to get it away from Lori, who's just finding everything out. And in the process, she gets a phone call from the cultural center saying that they found another ancestor of hers, which makes her really interested. And so she goes there, and I like how she basically stages a break-in. Like, gets there and she's on the phone, just like, hey, did you get that like call up from that silent alarm at the cultural center? And people are just like, what? I don't know. And she's like, yeah, the window's broken and everything. They're like, do you want us to send backup? She's like, no, I got it. Then she just breaks the window and breaks inside so she can find this information. I'm like, that's really clever. I like that scene. And you have this really cool scene where she gets to look at her family tree, and the way they do it is so weird. Basically, she talks to the computer screen again, and then it shoots out this like acorn. Then she goes into this room and basically like plants, which grows this like holographic tree, and then starts showing like the people in her family, and basically starts showing her family tree and like her great-grandparents, who are the characters we saw in like the first 2 episodes in those opening prologues, and then you see her grandfather. So she gets to find out a little bit more information about it. And that to me is an example of the episode not really moving things forward. Like, I know that she had to learn this stuff too, but it didn't really feel like any new information for the audience, at least in my opinion. Like, it was kind of stuff that we basically figured out. Except for the fact that like it's implied that Will died in the massacre, even though of course we know he didn't. But aside from that, it just didn't really feel like any new information. But it was kind of interesting from a visual standpoint to see how that plays out. And then she hears a big crashing sound and runs out, and she sees Lori standing in front of her car from the ending of the last episode. And basically she just goes, yep, that's my car. It went missing. And Lori's all like, what? She's clearly suspicious of Angela. She knows something's going on, and so basically she goes and looks into that. After that, you get a very interesting scene where Angela goes to talk to Looking Glass, and basically goes in this almost like underground bunker that he has in his backyard. And first thing is, like, you can tell that Looking Glass is he's a little weird, he's a little off. And the first thing you see is that he has all these pictures of like squids from like the Squid Falls, and he's clearly keeping track of it. And then he gets a little bit more information on those. He basically says that like they came from another dimension. So I guess these squids just keep falling to Earth like from another dimension every once in a while. It's really weird, but even she's just kind of, okay, you're putting too much thought into this, whatever. And then she talks about Judd and how he had a like KKK uniform in his closet, and she basically brings it out and like shows it to him. And he's just like, geez, okay. And he doesn't seem too like distraught over it. He's kind of just like, oh, you know, well, maybe it wasn't ancestors. He doesn't seem too distraught over it. And then basically she wants him to have his ex look into these pills, which were Will's pills that were left in the car. And she wants him to figure out what they are exactly. I think it is another scene that when I saw it, I was like, what the hell? Because basically, Angela's disposing of the evidence of the wheelchair and everything. She's throwing it off this like bridge or on this like highway, and she turns around and there's this dude in like a full body spandex suit watching her. The guy books it and she starts chasing after him, and essentially he takes these like bottles out of his belt that he has, essentially just lubing him up, runs and just slides into the sewer and getting away. And you're just like, what the hell is that? Who's this guy? Why is he what is that? I have no idea. And that's what prompts her to go to the police station and finding out that, you know, Laurie's in charge now and basically acting as like police chief in a way. And, you know, Angela walks in just like, what are you doing and everything. And Laurie's just like, hey, you know, I'm in charge now. She's like, hey, by the way, I found some leads on your car. And she's like, what? Why is this important? So clearly Laurie is, like I said, she's on to Angela and she knows there's something up and she's just trying to look into this. But I like their interaction. I like their chemistry. You know, both of them kind of mean well, but they're still very suspicious of each other. Like, Angela doesn't trust her at all, you know, and you can tell that Laurie doesn't trust Angela either. Like, I really like their chemistry. I really like seeing them interact together. I think that's some of the highlights of the episode. Laurie also reveals that she found fingerprints in the car of Will, and she has a whole like file on him that he's a guy who went off the grid. He was a New York cop and stuff like that. So I'm like, that's really interesting. You're getting like kind of pieces of information in this episode, and you're kind of like getting revealed a bit more about characters and a bit more about connections. And that's one of the things I thought was really fascinating, like finding out more about his character. And so they figure out that Lady True's like big facility has these little kind of ship type of things that can pick stuff up, and she thinks that maybe that that one of those people picked up the car. So they want to go there to ask them some questions. And you get this really interesting car ride with Laurie and Angela where they're discussing a bunch of things. At one point Laurie brings up her ex-boyfriend who a lot of times didn't have a lot of time for her and stuff like that, and you know she's talking about Dr. Manhattan, which I thought that was kind of interesting. And then at one point she starts discussing like Angela and the mask and how it's like meant to like hide trauma and everything, and she's just like, yeah, you know, I used to do that too. And Angela's just like, wait, what? Like, really? And he's just like, yeah. And like her partner's in the back seat. She's like, yeah, hey, you're big on the superhero stuff. Tell her what my trauma was. And he basically goes like, he explains everything about how, you know, her parents are the comedian and Silk Spectre. They were part of the Minutemen. And Angela just goes, oh, like the TV show? And like immediately the guy's just like, that TV show's garbage. It's inaccurate. And then he basically goes through the whole thing that, like, you know, comedian tried to rape her. Basically, her father tried to rape her mother. And Laurie's just like, yep, that's my trauma. That's why I did this stupid shit. And so I thought that whole scene was interesting. It's like, I don't know, just the way it told the information I thought was really cool, even though it's stuff to, like, I already know as a fan. So they get to Lady True's facility and they're asking around, and this is a scene where I kind of started to realize, like, I feel like Lady True is kind of this story's equivalent to Adrian Veidt. I know we already have Adrian Veidt in this story, but I mean, whereas like I felt that like Judd is kind of like the comedian equivalent in this like story, I really feel like Lady True is the Adrian Veidt equivalent, because I just saw all these connections with this like big facility. Kind of reminded me of the snow facility that he has in the book. And that's what it was starting to feel like. And then they basically hit it over the head with, yeah, this is it. Because Lori and Angela start talking to her, and basically Lori turns and notices that there's an Adrian Veidt statue, this life-size golden statue of Adrian Veidt in the Ozymandias costume and everything standing there. And she's just like, whoa, this is here. Okay, that's interesting. And then she realizes that the statue is like an older, like middle-aged version of Adrian Veidt. She's like, well, why is he old? And, you know, Lady Chu says something about, like, you know, we always look up to our elders, so that's why he's older in there. Which kind of makes me wonder, does she know that he's still alive? Because then we also find out that Lady True took over Adrian Veidt's company. So I think that solidifies it, that she's the story's version of Adrian Veidt, and you get an even bigger confirmation of that in the final scene of this episode. So that was really interesting. And then, basically, you know, she says that she's from Vietnam and everything, and basically she goes, oh yeah, there's this old Vietnam saying that we have, and she speaks in Vietnamese to Angela, and you find out that what she says is, your grandfather wants to know, did you get the pills? So, Lady True is working with her grandfather. What exactly and why, I don't know, but that's all connected somehow. So that's a very interesting development. I wasn't quite expecting that, and we elaborate more on that when we get to the final scene. But before that, we get to the Adrian Veidt stuff. Now, the Adrian Veidt scenes, to me, has been a highlight of the show so far, because of how bizarre and just strange they are, and this is no exception. This actually kind of explains a little bit more, still very vaguely, but also gives us some more weird imagery, because it starts off with Adrian in this boat, and you see him with this little cage, like, picking up stuff from the water, and he's picking up little fetuses. And you're like, what the fuck? I'm sitting there like, what is this? And then you start to put together that that's how those clones are born. That they're fetuses that are in the water, and he's picking them up and looking at them, and they're kind of squirming a little bit, and he sees some that he doesn't like, he just tosses them back in the water, and we're like, what the fuck? It's just really weird. There's really crazy imagery. And then you see him, he finds two that he likes, and he brings them to this machine and sets them in there and basically turns it on, and the thing starts spinning. And you see these little, like, they look like fetus animatronics, like kind of like squirming a little. It's so weird. And he walks away and puts on this music, and in the background you hear the babies, the fetuses, like crying and like screaming, and the screams slowly turn into adult human screams. And then you see that it's their bodies of the adult versions of those clones spinning around in the machine. And Adrian Veidt walks up, opens the door, and goes, happy birthday. So that's basically how those things are born. It doesn't quite explain what they are and why that they're fetuses that are found in a lake. But that's interesting. That's new information. And you see he's bringing them back to his castle and everything, and he's trying to teach them a little bit, and basically saying, like, I'm your master. He's like, I'm not your maker. I didn't create you, but I am your master. And brings them into this kitchen where all of the dead bodies are of all these other clones just dead, and that was kind of nuts. And you can tell that Adrian Veidt's kind of frustrated with these guys, because, like, we see one of the bodies holding the horseshoe, like in that episode, or when the first episode, he goes, no, I don't need that yet. Just throws it back at him. You're like, Jesus Christ. And basically then after that, you see them taking those dead bodies and putting them in a catapult and catapulting them up into the sky. And you see Adrian Veidt looking up and watching them, and you see the bodies just disappear into the sky, and that's it. And then Adrian Veidt says, like, you know, I've been here for 4 years. First I thought it was paradise, now I know it's a prison. And you're like, wait, what? So I guess it feels like he's been banished to this place. Which makes me wonder if Lady True had anything to do with that. Like, maybe she banished him there and then she knows that he's alive? I don't know, it's just a theory. But yeah, and he's basically saying that now he wants to escape. He really wants to get out of here. He's sick of being in this place. What place it is exactly, I don't know. But that's definitely interesting. That kind of explains a little bit more that he is somewhere and he's stuck there. He can't get out, and he's been there for 4 years. Which is interesting that it took this long for him to be officially declared dead, which is what they've been saying in the last few episodes. So yeah, that was just some crazy things, like catapulting the dead bodies and the little fetuses was just so bizarre. And then we get to the final scene where you see Lady True sitting with Will and talking with him, and she's basically like, you know, I want to make sure you're all in on this because now there's a family connection, and a lot of times when that happens people get cold feet. And then Will stands up from his chair, so clearly he's not wheelchair bound, and just goes, you know, I don't have cold feet. And then he walks up and they're looking outside into the sky, and he's just like, you know, in 3 days, she'll know what I've done. And I'm just like, what's gonna happen in 3 days? It feels like another Squid situation from Watchmen. And that's where I'm getting the major Adrian Veidt connection between Lady True and him, because it seems like this whole thing with this clock that Lady True is doing, that something bad's gonna happen in 3 days. That's all they're saying, and I'm just like, what is gonna happen? What is that clock? What is she doing? Like, I wanna know. It's so fascinating. It's really interesting. That's why I'm still really liking this episode. Like I said, I feel like the plot didn't move forward too much, but we got introduced to Lady True, who's this really fascinating and strange character who I really like, and showed us some weird things, and explained a little bit more of Adrian Veidt's situation, not fully, and just added this whole thing of something that's going to happen in 3 days that Angela's grandfather is a part of. And I don't know, I want to see where it goes. I really can't wait for the next episode. The ending of this one really made me want to see what comes next. So yeah, that's episode 4 of HBO's Watchmen. So yeah, that's all I have to say for now, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.